Welcome to the Leading with No Regrets podcast. In this episode, our executive director, Albo, has a powerful conversation with Brett Clemmer, the CEO and president of Man in the Mirror. Brett's message will challenge you on the critical importance of being a catalyst for creating the community through which men can thrive. Brett brings with him deep research and personal experience in understanding how different generations are socialized. We're glad you can join us.
Welcome to the Leading with No Regrets Leadership Podcast. This is a conversation where we come alongside men's ministry leaders to enable them to be better equipped to disciple the men in their community. And I'm so excited you get to meet a friend of the No Regrets, Brett Clemmer. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brett.
It's great to be with you, Albo. Thank you, man.
Beautiful. Hey, Brett is the president and CEO of Man in the Mirror, and he is just an amazing, amazing person, somebody who has spoken to the lives of many people. He's an author, he's a speaker, and we cannot wait to have a conversation with you, Brett. Now, as we start our conversation today, one of the questions I love to ask leaders in getting to know them is a leadership conversion question. And really, it's not about our conversion into the faith, but occasionally God does some stuff in the lives of men, and especially men leaders, that kind of frames for them what their heart's passion and their mission would be. And in a way of us getting to know you, Brett, I don't know if you can roll us back to a moment which you consider to be a leadership conversion moment for you.
It's funny, Albo, I don't really feel like there's a moment. I feel like I'm more like Eugene Peterson has a book, and he talks about a long obedience in the same direction. So I feel like a lot of my journey as a leader has been God's put an opportunity in front of me, and then I've stepped into that opportunity, and he's put another opportunity in front of me, and I've stepped into that opportunity. And I've never really had a grand master plan or like a moment where I just felt like this was the thing. But I think it really goes back probably to my father. You know, I grew up with a great, great dad, and not a lot of guys can say that, or not everybody can say that, but I had a wonderful father who really instilled in me maybe some overconfidence when I was younger, but definitely some confidence that I could step into situations and steer things or be the man I wanted to be, go the direction that I wanted to go. And even in middle school and high school, you know, I played sports. I think that probably fed into it as well. And I've always just found myself to be in positions where, most of them small, but where I was able to be a bit of a leader. And then I constantly think of Paul's letter to Timothy in 2 Timothy, where he talks about fanning the flame of the gift of God. And so I try to think that way, like just fan the flame and see where the Lord takes me. It's not taken me where I thought it would take me. Like I've had dreams that have been my dreams and not really where God wanted to take me. And I've had other things that were just so unexpectedly amazing. And so I've just been trying to focus on being faithful in the moment and not trying to be overly aspirational.
You know, you've said two things that I think, will really stand out to many of our men's leaders and listeners. One of them, the idea that you had a dad who instilled in you confidence. You even used the word maybe overconfidence. And I gotta tell you, there must be somebody who's out there who's like, I wish I had that. I wish I had the overconfidence, because if anything, many of us, what we got from the generation before us is, you cannot do it, you're not making it. Tell us a bit about what went into that, the sense of what does even overconfidence look like? It's a good problem to have in my books, you know?
Yeah, you know, my dad, I've told people this a lot. I cannot remember a day that I talked to my dad that he didn't tell me two things. I love you and I'm proud of you. And, you know, that goes back to when Jesus was getting baptized in the river and the Spirit descended on him like a dove, and the Father speaks from heaven and he says, "This is my son whom I love and with whom I am well pleased. This is my boy. I love him and I'm proud of him." And I think my dad just really took that to heart. And so he just always was reminding me of my abilities, reminding me of the lessons that he had taught me, reminding me of what my character should be, what we believed in. You know, he's a strong, strong believer. I grew up outside of Boston and going to church, every time the doors were open, it felt like we were there. But my dad was just really committed to raising me up to be a man of God. And I'm grateful for that. I mean, he just constantly was telling me, here's a great example of the overconfidence. I was in high school and our church sent teams out on mission trips. And my dad had always had this deal with us, with my sister and I. He worked on the financial district in Boston. He was a marketing guy in the finance world and eventually did that on Wall Street too. But he would usually be able to plan a schedule out a year in advance. So we could pick a trip to go with him. And we used to always take the trips to Colorado so we could take a couple days and go skiing. That was sort of our thing. So I had traveled a lot by the time I was in high school. And I'll never forget, I was going on this mission trip and the youth pastor was in charge of our team. And I started telling him like how we should be arranging our travel. Now, this is a guy that had traveled internationally for years. Like I was such a little, arrogant teenager. And
Right.
luckily that man loved me enough just to smile and nod and then sort of pull me aside and say, Brad, I've done this a fair amount. And
I got this. Okay.
yeah, I've got this. So knock it off. So, dumb little things like that. And part of the benefit of being confident is that you're not afraid of risk. My dad also instilled in me this idea that it's okay to fail. Like what's not okay is to be apathetic or to not take advantage of opportunities that are given to you because you're scared. And which is, by the way, the second part of that verse from 2 Timothy 1 is, don't have a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and self-control. And I think that's what it looks like when you're confident is risk doesn't really scare me. I mean, let me rephrase that. Risk scares me, but I don't let the fear stop me. And
Rule you. Yeah.
it's okay if things don't work out all the time.
Brett, really insightful that you say that because you and I spend a lot of our time working with leaders, that side of things, and we are involved in resourcing, equipping, all this, like passing on, like more impartation type stuff.
Yeah.
You threw out a statement that your dad communicated to you frequently, daily, like, I love you and I'm proud of you. I can bet you many men in their ministry don't imagine that men need to hear that. Almost like men grow out of that. You can assume men grow out of it.
Yeah.
What do you imagine makes it such that it is so hard to do that for men that we're leading later on in life? Because I can tell you, not many men hear those words frequently. Sometimes they don't get to hear it from their family and definitely not from the people who are leading them or the people around them. What is that thing?
That's an interesting question, Albo, because I have men around me in a couple of different circles. Like, so I have my work circle, I have my church circle, and then I have sort of a professional circle of guys that I spend a fair amount of time with. And one of the things that I've noticed about all three of those circles is that the guys tell each other that they love each other all the time. Like, there's many a time where I'm at church and I'm saying goodbye, hey man, I'll see you next week. Have a great week, love you. And the guy will say, man, I love you too. I really appreciate you. So I think there's this maybe a little boomer Gen X generation of, being tough and being self-sufficient. And the younger guys, I think, are a lot more open to expressing emotion and hearing it and expressing it. I'm an old Gen Xer. I'm clinging to my Gen Xness. Gen X guys are tough and self-sufficient and a little bit of the Clint Eastwood, grit your teeth and get on with it.
Absolutely.
I would say that I think the younger generations, they're both sort of two sides of a continuum, right? So I think the older generations are too much in the sort of self-sufficiency, and maybe the younger generations have swung maybe a little bit too far the other way of just needing reassurance or very much living in their emotions, assuming that their emotions are true. So I think we need to find that happy medium where we can love each other well, we can encourage each other. You think about all the one another's in Scripture, right? Those are there because that's men's like heartbeat is to need to be encouraged and to have someone lift you up and to be exhorted and someone to confess your sins to. All those one another's are
Right.
just, they're like a manual for how men should develop relationships, godly relationships.
Man, I'm seeing that component being maybe a small little section in one small little chapter in a book, and yet that is like fuel for all of us.
Yeah.
Men, women, children, adults, all alike. It is fuel for us, and it's the language Jesus says he will use upon us at the end of
Right.
time. Well done, good and faithful servant, ahead of everything we get to do. So thanks for bringing that up. And also you've used an expression I'm going to start using. I'm clinging to my Gen Xing type of
Yeah.
thing. I think you use
Yeah.
that language. I'm going to so use that, man, from here
Yeah.
on. Yeah. Hey, Brett, one of the things I love doing is to ask leaders about what causes their spirits to be stirred. And how I phrase it is, what has been annoying you lately? And we're not talking about anger management kind of stuff. We know
Yeah.
you're not that. But God puts some stuff in us that when we hit the circumstances and situations, something just kind of rises from within us. It was like you cannot stop until what is not is moved to what is, type of thing.
Yeah.
What are some of those things in your life right now? Maybe one or two.
This may be broader than you're thinking, but I will tell you, I'm very frustrated with, I just call it the algorithm, without realizing it, we're programmed, by our media inputs. And most of us are spending way, way too much time on social media and on, and on the news feeds that we're getting from that. I don't know the latest numbers, but the number of people that actually get their news on a social media channel as opposed to a news channel or reading a newspaper or just doing their own research, is kind of staggering. All of that is designed just to give us more of what we want. If we like something, or at this point, even if we spend time reading something, we get more and more and more of that. All of our critical thinking goes away because we're not really seeing all sides of a situation or of an issue. There's a writer named Jonathan Haidt. I think he's a sociology professor at NYU. And I mean, he's a secular Jew. He's not a Christian writer, but he just talks about the impact of social media and of online, screen time, especially as it relates to our kids. He wrote a great book called The Anxious Generation that talks about the impact of social media on especially, boys. It's driving them to pornography and gaming, and girls, it's driving to comparing yourself to other people.
Yep.
And am I pretty enough? Am I skinny enough? Am I smart enough? Am I whatever enough? It's killing our kids. But I think for them, and also for those of us that are older, and if you're spending a lot of time there, and Haidt talks about this too, is he calls it attention fragmentation, that we
Yep.
we can't do anything for very long. Like once 30 or 40 seconds have gone by, our ability to focus and concentrate just moves us on to the next thing. And I don't know about you, but there's a lot of things that take more than 30 or 40 seconds for
yeah.
me to like actually get the benefit of. And so I think it's frustrating to me, it's annoying to me how much that has infiltrated our culture and our society, and it affects everything. Like you speak to
really
people,
does.
I speak to people, if you don't make quick points, people start to wander and drift with their attention span. And I don't know how we fix it. That's why I'm so annoyed
Right.
by it. Because if there was an easy solution, I would have it. Maybe it's just a massive EMP pulse that takes out all of our electricity
know,
for
right?
a month. So I think the sort of societally, the whole issue of the algorithm just really frustrates me. I'll tell you the other thing that annoys me is I annoy me. I'm frustrated that my own desire, what I say I want, is not always reflected in what I do. So my desire and my will are not in sync. And, it's Romans 7 stuff, right?
It is.
I don't do the things I want to do. I do the things I don't want to do. And that's a constant battle. And hopefully it's like, I don't know who coined this phrase, but it's like a holy discontent.
Yeah.
It's just wanting to be the man God calls me to be, wanting to impact the people around me in a more positive way and not waste my time on things that are not productive. Which I'm
Thanks
good
for
at.
sharing that. Yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing that. Especially we talk about the algorithm, how I think the sad thing about it is that on this one, we're both victims and culprits at the same time. and
Yes.
it becomes self-feeding and just becomes a spiral. And
Oh, yeah.
especially when you're not aware of it, or you're not thinking that, you can just kind of get lost in that world. Thanks for sharing that. And just again, when you find a solution for that, please
Mm.
share widely.
Yeah.
Many people out there will be, trying to find out what that is about. A couple of things I want to just go back to with you. At this time of the year, many of our men leaders are coming towards the end of like the early start of the year stuff. They've already gotten into a certain groove. And many men's ministries and many men's movements at this point are trying to figure out what do we need to do differently. They're almost like restarting in their year. And I know kind of restarting is not something that is strange to you. You've had a few restarts in your past. I am curious if you'd be willing to share with us a few lessons from either seasons when you've been in transition, or you've needed to, get a fork in the road and to be able to shift how you do stuff or what you get to do. What are some of those lessons that you've picked up along the way?
My biggest restart was coming to Man in the Mirror. I was in the late 90s. I had a software company with some friends, and we were going really, really well, going like gangbusters. And small company, we're doing a lot. We were doing big ticket business. And that was back in the late 90s when everything was just exploding from a technology standpoint. And we had some venture capitalists get involved with our company. And so just driving us. And so I was on the road all the time, and I tell people I was traveling all week for business. Meanwhile, I had a wife and two toddlers at home, and we were super involved in our church. We went to a large church that had multiple services every weekend, and my wife and I were involved in children's ministry, and so we were involved sometimes every single service all weekend. I would minister to other people's kids on the weekend, and then I would abandon my family for the week. And then I would rush home so that I could minister to other people's kids again on the weekend. And the problem with that was that nobody at church could tell that there was anything wrong because we were
Right.
always there. But my wife was miserable. My kids hardly knew me because I was, either on the road or working, 10, 12, 14-hour days sometimes because I was trying to get this company off the ground. It all came to a head when I had a last minute trip again, and my wife said when I called her to tell her, "Hey, I have to go out of town again tomorrow." It came to a head when she said, "That's okay. It's easier when you're not here."
Whoa.
And I was very caught off guard, And so I got home that night, and I said, "What do you mean it's easier when I'm not here?" And she said, "Look, I get it. You're trying to build this company, but you're gone all the time. When you are home, you're exhausted. You often leave before the kids get up and don't get home until after they're in bed. So they don't see you sometimes a day or two at a time, or you're traveling. And the only time we really have a good conversation is when you're in a hotel room somewhere 1,000 miles away. It's 10:30 at night and we can actually talk for 20 minutes on the phone. So, we're fine. And just go on your trip." So I knew I was in trouble, but I really didn't know what to do about it because I really felt trapped to try to get this company going. In my mind, I'd also built up this story that I was doing it for my family
Right.
when I was really doing it for me. And about that time, my wife was in a small group with some women, and one of the husbands called me up and said, "Hey, I think since our wives are in a small group together, we should get the guys together and have our own group too, if for no other reason than just to protect ourselves, because I'm pretty sure they're
Right.
talking about us." And I said, yeah, absolutely. God's timing's perfect. And I'm in. And, I grew up in the church. So I'm like, well, what are we going to do in this group? And he said, well, we're gonna read a book. They handed some book away at church a few weeks back. So just grab that book and bring it. Did you get one? I said, yeah, I got one. So I go grab the book, blow the dust off it. And the book's called The Man in the Mirror and 24 Problems That Men Face. And I'm like, well, I wish I only had 24. And so I read the first chapter is the rat race, and the second chapter is leading an unexamined life, and the third chapter is, are you a cultural Christian or a biblical Christian? And I'm like, man, this guy wrote a book about me. So I got into this group with these guys, and it was remarkable. I will say the first 4, 5, 6 weeks in the group was a lot of that sort of, I call it Christian mumbo jumbo. We were just, how was your week? Oh, I had such a blessed week. And how was your week?
Right.
Well, my week was hard, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And so about 5 or 6 weeks into it, I said to the guys, look, I can't sit here and act like everything's fine. Like my marriage is falling apart. Our business was starting to struggle. My kids don't know me. My wife's mad at me. I don't see a way to solve this. And, if we're just going to sit here and act like, everything's okay in Jesus land, I'm out. Like I can't keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so the guy next to me said, well, I can't believe you said that. And I'm like, oh, here we go, judgment. And he goes, because nobody knows that I've been struggling with porn.
Oh.
And the next guy says, my marriage is in deep trouble. And the next guy says, my company's in trouble and I don't know how to tell my wife about it. And like on around the group, every single one of us had like really deep problems going on in our lives. Every one of us was a leader in the church. And we got to the last guy, his name was Jim. And Jim's sitting there with eyes like his eyes are like saucers by the time we get around to him. And he goes, actually, I'm doing pretty well. And we're like, man, that's great. He's like, yeah, I don't know if I should be in this group with you guys, And we're like, Jim, you can't leave. You're our only hope, like,
right.
Like you're showing us that we can get through this. But, so that group of guys, man, we locked arms. We talked about real things. We shared our struggles. We held each other accountable. We had to earn that right to hold each other accountable, but we got there. Mm-hmm. It was definitely a restart. And
right.
The way I knew it was working is one day the company was really struggling. The stock market crashed, in the first quarter of 2000. And so all of our funding, it just disappeared and we're struggling to make payroll. And so I called my wife one day and I said, hey, I'm not going to go to small group tonight. I'm just going to come home. I'm just so weary. And she said, when you feel like this is when you need those guys the most. So we really are okay, and we will be here when you get home. But you have been a much better husband since you've been going to that group. You've been a much better father since you've had those guys in your life. So go to the group, and we'll see you when you get home. And that's when I knew it was really changing.
Right.
Changing not just how I felt, but how I was behaving and how I was treating my family. And eventually the company went out of business, and that guy Jim, who everything was fine with, gave my resume to Pat Morley, and the next thing you know, they're calling me for an interview, and so I went from reading his book to working for him, and now running the ministry that he started. So
I love it.
Pretty crazy story.
Yeah.
How many times have you wanted to impact your world for Christ, but struggled to take the first step? Well, you are not alone. Our latest resource, Disciple Maker 101, is designed to help you become a disciple who makes disciples. This self-paced online course will provide you with practical tools to help you identify men in your sphere of influence, equip you to share your faith story, and practical tips to invest in the life of others by leading a small group. To become a disciple maker, visit noregretsmen.org. Again, that's noregretsmen.org, and click on Become a Disciple Maker.
I think it is, in many ways, the kindness of God to allow us to go through those moments. No one wishes for them. That painful little tunnel, and sometimes you don't even see the light at the end of it, but it is the kindness of God to allow us to go through that, cauldron pretty much of intensity, pain, anxiety. You feel like the floor has just been ripped from under you, only to realize that just in the similar death and resurrection way, Jesus has another plan for you on the other side.
Absolutely.
And maybe we can lean into that idea. I think you've mentioned the idea of what community has meant for you. I wish community was something that when you get it done the first time, you've always figured it out. But it seems like we're constantly putting work into making sure that we stay in community, because it's not something you can check that box for the rest of life. And especially now, that there's an excitement about what God is doing around us. God is drawing the Gen Z generation among us in ways that none of us can say that there was a church or any movement that was making it happen. And we're watching this thing happen all around the US, all around the world. And at the same time, especially from your experience with the man in the mirror, with no man left behind kind of mode, how does community play out for this generation as well? What are some of the things that you're seeing so that they do not continue in a space of isolation, even if they're done with their college experience or their subcultures that have been a really, really good incubator for their faith? What are you seeing as some of the things that next generation needs to still keep in the back of pocket so that community becomes something that's not secondary?
First of all, I will say that this is a lonely generation.
Is
You
it?
know, it is a very disconnected generation. They've been brought up, going back to the algorithm issue. The great thing about Gen Z is, for the most part, they see the algorithm and they don't believe it. Like, they don't trust anything.
Right.
They just, and now you've got AI coming and they can sniff it out a mile away. Stuff that you and I might look at and believe, they're like, well, are you dumb? Like, that's not real. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, now that I look at it. But because there's this distrust of everything, it's a lot harder for this younger generation to really form meaningful connections with each other. You know, so I think loneliness is the great sort of problem of our age. By the way, I think it's a problem for men at all ages.
Right.
It just manifests differently in each generation. And in the Gen Z, there's just this sort of not believing what they see, and so they've got to sort of work past that. I'll go back up a generation for a minute, if I could. Like, the millennials are in deep trouble, and only 31% of millennial men are married. Think about that for a second. Only 31% of men in their 30s are married. And so Gen Z's coming in behind that. They're looking at this generation above them. And I see the Gen Z sort of rejecting a lot of the millennial mindset on things and being a little tougher, honestly, being a little more self-sufficient. They're rejecting sort of we went from self-improvement and self-help, which implied that I had something that needed to be improved and I needed to do better than I was doing, to like self-care and self-love. And then the worst part, self-acceptance, which is like, no, I'm okay the way I am. And in fact, other people should accommodate the way I am.
Right.
And I think the Gen Z is now coming around the other side of that going, that's crazy. Like, that's actually irrational. To feel like that. And so we're seeing upticks in a weird way. We've done a lot of research here at Man in the Mirror. We have in fact, I'll tell guys, they can go to our site and look for the state of young men in America. We do an annual report. It's a free download, a little annual report that's just looking at the statistics about what's going on with men in their 20s and 30s. We are seeing an uptick in church attendance and a huge uptick in Bible sales that nobody's really sure what's going on. But I will say this, there's a lot of talk about the political, like men are becoming more conservative. But there's a researcher named Ryan Burge that a lot of us follow. And Ryan has pointed out, for instance, that it's not that men are moving right as much as it is that women are moving left, and they're moving left radically. So when you've got a gender of men who are, I think, probably sort of to the right of center, sort of ideologically. It's not about politics as much as it is about ideology. And then you have women that are moving so far to the left, so much into the emotions of things, so much into this sort of toxic compassion that's out there. Then these guys are like, well, I don't want to date a girl like that. I don't want to marry a girl like that. And so what do I do?
Oh, wow.
You know? NBC did a study a few months ago, and they gave Gen Z men and women, they said, rank these 13 things in order of importance for a meaningful life.
Right.
And then they separated them by who they voted for in the last election, just to sort of get a mindset. Conservative men, young men in their 20s, said having a successful marriage and having a good family, having a successful family, those were 1 and 3 on their list of things that defined a successful life out of 13. For the liberal women, it was 11 and 13. So I think this is what the Gen Z guys in particular are facing right now, is that the average woman, now there's great women coming out of Bible colleges and Christian colleges and great families and those kinds of things. But women, and I think frankly, it's the social media that are more susceptible to it because it preys on your emotions so quickly. The women are going left or are going, I hate the word left because it's not about politics. It's about the way that you view the world. I think Bill Maher's, who you and I would probably both disagree with greatly politically, but he sees this like what's happening with people with these ideologies, you know, that are just so extreme and they don't feel extreme to them. And then you've got what I think most Gen Z guys are: rational, intelligent, very smart, they grew up in the technology age. They're figuring out AI, really quickly. They're all vibe coding and, but from a sort of a worldview standpoint, the women are moving away from them. And I don't know what we're going to do about that. Like, I don't know how guys are going to cope with, it used to be that the women would say, well, the rational male dating pool is small. And I think it's flipped completely. I think the rational female dating pool is really shrinking in the eyes of many men.
Dude, you just allowed us to go into a very deep, level of understanding, not just what we're seeing, but what could be at the bottom and the cause of it. And thank you for allowing us go there. And you mentioned that people can go in and see some of the results of your research. And for our listeners out there, maninthemirror.org, go check around and find out, all the tools and resources that are available there for you. Brett, the seat you sit on, I'm sure you see glimmers of hope, stories of people who are doing things different, doing things right. And I'm curious if there are some of those you want to bring to us, either because of the work you guys have done with different individuals or groups and stuff like that allows us to see, hey, it's not all morbid, The Holy Spirit is continuing to do some amazing, epic things, some very unprecedented stuff. And then he invites us to be part of that journey with him. Share with me and some of our listeners, what are some of the things you're seeing that the Holy Spirit is doing around you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last couple of years, we've had a huge revival on college campuses. You've seen the Asbury revival. You've seen, I mean, people aren't talking about it as much as they could, but like the Ohio State football team has had just this incredible upswell of Christian faith. I think in the sports world in general, we're seeing men who are, this is a great example of it actually, men who are just, I think 3 or 4 years ago, they were afraid to speak out about what they believed because it just wasn't received well. And now after the last few years, I think people are like, you know what, I'm just not buying into this rhetoric anymore. Like, truth is truth. Like, I think the idea that truth is actually getting some traction, and it's great to see some of these guys with a platform speak out. And we got to be careful. Worship Jesus, not a sports figure, but you can admire the things that they're talking about. The thing that I'm seeing is I am seeing a lot of, we call it gathering, and outside of the walls of the church, not disconnected from the church per se, but more invisible church versus visible church.
Right.
And around shared interests. There's a nationwide, some people might not like this, but I love it. There's a nationwide group of Christian cigar smokers that has like 6,000 or 7,000 guys on their Facebook group, and groups of men are meeting in chapters, so to speak, of this group called Holy Smokes, and all around the country. And there's guys gathering, Christian men gathering together every month to just sit and talk for 2 or 3 hours. I'm seeing lots of this kind of thing happening around the country, just groups of men slowing down. I think the sort of weekly hour-long small group has its place, but most of these guys, they don't want that. What they want is like, hey, if I know that once a month I can hang out with a few guys and we can talk about real stuff, and maybe it's around physical activity, or maybe it's around a hobby or whatever, but they're having these conversations about how life works and about struggles they're having. And I know one group that meets in a guy's backyard, and they meet once a month, and they'll have 50, 60 guys show up for it now. Over time, it's grown up to that. And it's so simple. All they do is they call it a check-in. And they just go around and share how they're doing in a minute. And not everybody has to talk. And they have a few rules about it. You're not platforming or politicking. You're talking about yourself and what's going on with yourself. And nobody's trying to solve your problem. They're just there to listen. And he said, after we do that, there's 50 or 60 guys. It could take 30, 45 minutes to go all the way around.
Right.
But then they're like, well, great. Feel free to hang out. And guys they just gather in small groups of clusters and just have conversation, And we started doing this at my church in the summertime. We do a cookouts and conversations time a couple times, where we'll get everybody together. We'll throw some hot dogs on the grill. I just give them a question to talk about. It's not necessarily a religious question, I give them 2 or 3 questions to talk about. And, one time we did, it was like, does anybody have any scars on their body? And so we got guys, wanting to show guys love to do this, right? Their battle scars,
Absolutely.
And they got this scar in this story. And, and you could see guys light up that don't normally talk, but they hadn't had a chance to share that story in a long time. And it brought life into them just to have some guys who wanted to hear their story. And so I think the biggest issue for this generation, and I don't mean age, I mean this time, is loneliness, is male loneliness. And a lot of people are saying that. Well, if loneliness is the problem, then relationship is the solution.
Really, yeah.
And so how do we foster a place where guys can gather together and just have meaningful conversations with each other? Because meaningful conversations lead to meaningful relationships.
Right.
And when guys start interacting with each other in these meaningful ways, that's when you begin to talk about let's get past the surface of the news, weather, sports, employment, and let's get down to the real issues of meaning and identity and purpose and brotherhood. And when you get down to that level, that's, I think, where great stuff happens, great gospel stuff happens. And, and then those guys go into their churches and they start spreading that gospel lifestyle around with other guys too.
Dude, what you described, I've been a pastor for almost 30 years now. And obviously I do small group, we do all the things. I check every box I can. And recently I got to be part of a group like just what you're describing. We get together. I don't even know if some of those folks know that I'm a pastor, that I've been a minister for all these years.
Yeah.
And my hero in that group is a guy who gathers everybody else.
Right.
And he does it. I mean, half the time he's feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing, but we're just doing it. And my role is to cheer him on and say, hey, dude, you don't have to take control of what's happening in that room. This seems like you're calling, almost to bring me to the place where I'm beginning to say the heroes in our generation are the people who are able to gather the people in a room for whatever cause. Because Jesus says, when I'm lifted up, I will draw men to myself. The person who can draw people in, chances are they are continuing the mission of God in a way they could never have imagined. And then those conversations, that 1 hour you're talking about a month feels very little. But dude, I cannot tell you how much I look forward to that 1 hour.
Yeah.
Because we get to just connect at a very deep level, strangers. But our need to find connection is so much bigger than the discomfort of not knowing each other, that we'll do it month after month. So really, really beautiful, man.
And thanks. I think this is something men are uniquely designed as well.
Tell me more about
women are great, but they are so detail oriented. They want to know every, and guys are more like, I care about you. I don't need all the details. Like you tell me what you want to tell me, and that's fine. I love hanging out with guys. A typical month for me is, probably a couple breakfasts with a couple different guys, once, in some of them multiple times. That's a more one-on-one mentoring thing. And then I've got my men's group that I meet with, that we get together once a month. And that's sort of that's the group that's all praying for each other and encouraging each other and speaking into each other's lives. And then, I've got a couple of groups that are more casual, just gatherings of guys. And I love it. And it's so fun. I love hanging out with guys and you can be silly, with some guys, a little crazy and pick on each other a lot. And then other guys, you can get down deep and really talk about the issues that you're facing.
I love it.
And I think we're uniquely built. God made us for a relationship. It's not good for man to be alone, and we can be that for each other.
And for all those leaders out there to just realize, the role of gathering men, it might feel like initially not much is happening. But if you're able to gather those men so that they're pulled away from their isolation, more than half the battle is won. And Jesus will meet them there. He will,
I think guys, they think they're supposed to be a teacher. They think they're supposed to have it all together. They don't need to teach anything. And like you said, they don't need to have it. They just need to provide place, provide a place for men to be in proximity, and then let the Holy Spirit do the rest. And the Holy Spirit will do much better than you would have with your Bible lesson or whatever, whatever book you've read lately. If you will just get men together and invite the Lord into it and watch what happens, and then he will draw men into those deeper relationships. And it's an amazing thing to see.
I love it. I love it. What another thing it does, it removes the pressure from you from needing to perform, needing to have all the answers, and to actually trust God. You create the space. And he says, I'm going to feel it. I'll do what I want to do in their lives. So thanks for just that encouragement to our leaders out there. Hey, Brett, before we are done, I'm always curious when I meet with leaders what they're working on. Like, what are some things that you're maybe just messing around with in the horizon? You're trying, I want to figure this one thing out. Maybe stuff you're writing, projects you're a part of that you think you could, give us an inside scoop into.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most exciting thing I'm working on is there's a group of ministry leaders that invited me in, and we're together trying to figure out this whole gathering thing.
Right.
And
wow.
so we actually created a website together called Sons United, SONS, sonsunited.org. And it's just a place where people that are doing this gathering can go to and communicate with each other. They can put a pin on a map if they want to, that other guys can find them if they want to find their gathering. And it's not a ministry. It's like nobody's trying to do anything other than just provide a place where the gatherers can gather. And so that's a pretty cool project that we're working on. I think here at Man in the Mirror, we've really refocused the ministry in the last few years. For the last 25 years, we've been a ministry that is very, very focused on helping what I would call sort of traditional men's ministry be more and more effective. And we need that. But there's a fair number of organizations that are helping with that. And No Man Left Behind is a great tool. We've got area directors around the country that are helping churches implement those principles, which is what they are. They're principles, not really a curriculum. But we're realizing now that our area directors need to get out of not be confined. They're still in the church, but they also need to be engaged more in their community and more directly doing outreach to these young men who are searching for truth. They are spiritually hungry, but they're institutionally suspicious. Spiritually hungry, but institutionally suspicious. And they are looking for the transcendent. They're looking for wonder.
Yes.
And so which is why I think, like, for instance, the Greek Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church have started to pick up young men, because there's ritual, there's beauty, there's order.
Fascinating what's happening there. Yeah.
History. Yeah. And I think in the Protestant church, sometimes we are so interested in exact right doctrine, like every jot and tittle, and then when we split over things that we don't agree on. I'm not in any way denigrating theological accuracy. I like theological accuracy too.
Yeah.
But if you're so committed to being right, more than you're committed to being in relationship, if you're so committed to telling people what's true as opposed to introducing them to God, then it's really self-serving, not serving the Lord. And so I think we have to recognize that young men are hungry, they're interested, but they want to know that they can come at the pace that they would say it's at their own pace. We know it's the pace the Holy Spirit brings them along at, and really, be along for the journey and enjoy it alongside of them.
I love it. Thank you. You clearly are embodying this. It is part of your lifestyle, clearly part of your mission. It's part of your history. Brett, this has been a humongous treat. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Al. I appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. So there you go, leaders out there. Our conversation with Brett Clemmer, phenomenal. I'm hoping as you're kicking off your year, you're beginning to ask questions about what are the creative spaces you're making so that the men around you can find real, authentic community and trust that God is going to work in those spaces, and you do not have to carry the weight of their rooms because He's already at work in all their lives. Brett, this has been amazing. If you're a leader out there and you want to find out more about our resources, please make sure you go to our website, noregretsmen.org, or download our app, the No Regrets app, and you'll get to hear so much more. And if this episode has been helpful for you, please like it and share with your friends and people in your community. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for joining the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. For more information and to access past recordings, please visit www.noregretsmen.org/podcast.
Life Camp USA is a nonprofit organization that mentors young men who have lost a father due to military or law enforcement service. Life Camp USA provides an all-expenses-paid, week-long, world-class camp experience that inspires, equips, and navigates these fatherless young men through some of life's toughest moments. Life Camp USA's mentors serve grieving families by helping these sons establish healthy identities, values, character, and goals without the crucial aid of a father in their life. To learn more about Life Camp's mission, visit lifecampusa.org. Again, that's lifecampusa.org.